This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
During the time of racial inequality, two men rose above all to unite the African American race to help elevate the civil rights movement throughout the mid-20th century.
Throughout America during the 1960s, people of color were being discriminated against through ideas such as separate but equal facilities, among other things. But Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. took a stand and built on the momentum already gained by others fighting for civil rights. Backed by John F. Kennedy and even Lyndon B. Johnson, who was vice president and president after Kennedy's assassination on November 22, 1963.
Malcolm Little, commonly known as Malcolm X, was born on May 9, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska. He was born the fourth out of 8 children and would grow up to have 6 children with then-wife Betty Shabazz. Malcolm's father was murdered when he was 6 years old, which led to this darkness in his life. This darkness led to the arrest of X when he was 21 years old for armed robbery in Boston. In prison, he met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the African-American sect, the Nation of Islam. He converted to the Nation, and when he was released, he changed his name to Malcolm X, with the X representing the unknown name of his African-American ancestors and their culture that had been lost during slavery.
You then, perhaps, now should take over the leadership of the black Muslims.
No, I have no desire to take over the leadership of the black Muslims, and I have never had that desire. But I do have this desire. I have a desire to see the Afro-American in this country get the human rights that are his due. I believe that the Islam religion is the best religion for our people because it creates unity and it gives one dignity and racial confidence and all of these things that are necessary to make a complete human being.
Michael King, or more commonly known as Martin Luther King Jr., was born January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. He was a co-minister with his father until 1960 and was influenced regarding his passive ways by his father and grandfather, who were both pastors at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. But his main inspiration to use passive resistance was Gandhi. King was a highly educated and intellectual man who went to Morehouse College at age 15 and later earned his doctorate at Boston University.
I want to remind this nation that the Negro has ever been the victim of violence. We do not condone violence when used by racist and reckless people of any color. But if a spirit of brotherhood is to prevail, we will need the protection of the law for our righteous work.
After prison, Malcolm became a minister for the nation. From 1952 to 1963, Minister Malcolm X helped build the Nation of Islam from a tiny sect to a significant force in the urban black America.
Ranked on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
His commanding stage presence, quick wit, and erudition, combined with the authenticity of his experience as a street hustler, made Malcolm X a remarkable orator and a dynamic leader.
Very simple answer to one question. Do you hate all white people?
I don't think it's a fair question. The white man doesn't even come into my attitude. Mr. Muhammad teaches us to love our own kind and let the white man take care of himself.
King began his journey as a pastor, and by 1955 had become the first Negro to accept to use leadership of his passive resistance roles. He gradually became more famous and powerful until his assassination on April 4, 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
X eventually left the Nation of Islam, having been banned for becoming too popular, and in June of 1964 founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity, where he began to preach to a crowd of more political black nationalism with an internationalist philosophy.
Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
This was commonly known as Pan-Africanism, and he continued to preach about it until February 21, 1965, when Malcolm X was shot to death by the Nation of Islam members while speaking at a rally of his organization in New York City.
Malcolm X and MLK, although both preaching about the civil rights movement, had different ways of handling it. Malcolm X used direct violence, while MLK used passive resistance.
So that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beast that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs.
That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadened complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner.
We need an action program while we are Muslims, while we are Christians, or while we are whatever we are. We still need an action program that will eliminate these evils that are in our community.
I feel that killing is a very tragic way to deal with any social problem. There is no violent solution to the problem that the Negro confronts in this country, and this is why I have constantly said that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. After all, the Negro ends up on the losing end.
Although Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X acted differently on the Civil Rights Movement, their point of conflict between passive resistance and direct action allowed for the entire African American race to be united under one movement, leading to the end of legalized segregation.
King and Malcolm X were involved in many of the defining moments of the Civil Rights Movement, including the Montgomery bus boycott, which was sparked by Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat to a white man on the bus even though it was required by law. The Montgomery bus boycott began December 5, 1955 and ended December 20, 1956 after Congress passed a bill outlawing legal segregation on buses. Sit-ins also helped outlaw segregation. A major turning point in the movement was Bloody Sunday in Alabama in 1965, in which state troopers horrifically assaulted peaceful civil rights protesters. This opened up the eyes of many people who had previously seen separate but equal as okay, but now they saw the true colors of those who were supporting it and their inhumanity, so they no longer agreed with it. This movement did more than just influence equality in America. Its effects were felt around the world, such as in Vietnam, where the United States pulled out partially because of protesters like King, who were angered because blacks were fighting for freedom overseas but not receiving it in full at home themselves.
Not only have X and King created immediate effect in America, but have lasting impacts to this day. These two men have inspired many movements today, like the Black Lives Matter movement. In today's society, an integrated school system is permanently in place, all thanks to the aspirations of King. MLK's statue in Washington, D.C. is only one of 4 non-presidents to receive a memorial, reminding people to always stand up for what is right, and sometimes passive resistance is the most effective way of protest. Although racism will never fully be abolished, thanks to these two men, blacks and whites can confidently look at each other eye to eye and as equals, aspiring artists like Michael Jackson to write songs such as Black or White or Man in the Mirror. In today's society, X has even made his way onto clothing apparel, symbolizing people are not afraid to fight for what they believe in. All thanks to the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987, people of all color have equal opportunity as whites do, resulting in a federal holiday honoring MLK, where we do not attend school to remember his greatness.
Turning points in the Civil Rights Movement include Ruby Bridges being the first black child to attend an all-white school in 1960 along with 5 other kids, the foundation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the I Have a Dream speech, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, June 12, 1967, the prohibition of interracial marriage is deemed illegal by the Supreme Court, and the Fairhouse Act of 1968. In 1963, King led his march in Washington where he delivered his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in front of 200,000 peaceful protesters. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was first proposed by John F. Kennedy, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. It is considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the Civil Rights Movement. Another monumental step in the right direction was the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, aimed to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote as guaranteed under the 15th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
In conclusion, these two men, having different backgrounds and viewpoints about the Civil Rights Movement, attracted all African Americans and eventually united them for the greater good. Today, society treats blacks equal to whites and gives them all opportunities that white people have. These two men were the spark that lit the fire to end segregation, discrimination, and racism. These two men united the African American community into pushing for equality.